It's my phone in the meantime.
Okay, I think we're connected now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Sip. I ended up doing like a weather forecast now, but on a murky day in Cambridgeshire. But it's going to be good because we're chatting with Roberto about flying. I can dream of some of those farther flung destinations where the sun shines. But yeah, first of all, thanks for joining me, Roberto.
Always a pleasure.
The godfather of air travelers, I've labelled you now, right?
So you say.
Cool. So lots to cover today. I think for a lot of people, it'll be great. Just we'll have a look at the history, if you like, not the every single day of it, but the history of air travel and accessible air travel. And I think it'd be nice to just share some of the great work you've been involved in. We'll touch on COVID because it's a bit hard not to at the moment. And obviously a little bit of some thoughts and opinions around what the future may be gearing up to look like for disabled people flying. So that's kind of the plan. Everyone watching, feel free to send in any comments and questions. Mark has already said hello, gents. So hi there, Mark. Hope you're good. And we've got Chloe. I think Ashante's tagged Chloe on LinkedIn to come and join us. So come over, Chloe, and join our discussion today. So yeah, Roberto, if you could kick us off with a sort of 1-2 minute intro to yourself, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, well, for starters, how did I get involved in this? My son has cerebral palsy.
Sure.
And when we started traveling by air, I noticed that there were a number of gaps.
Yeah.
And from the silliest, and I would like to touch this later on during the show. When we would book a wheelchair, when I would book a wheelchair for him, normally he would get an unsuitable wheelchair at airports because the system wasn't fit for purpose. It's definitely not fit for purpose because it wouldn't capture the fact that he was a child. So there have been extreme cases where I was sent an adult wheelchair, and at the same time, when they realized that it was a child, they would ask me to sign a waiver of liability because the wheelchair was unsuitable. So as you see, I started getting curious about why things were going that way, and I started getting involved first with the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK, then with other civil aviation authorities across Europe, then ended up in Brussels, working with the European Commission on these things. And then, it was just one after the other, and I joined the different experience, and it was all very useful because the more perspectives you get, the better and the more pan-disability your horizon has.
Yeah.
Because different people have different needs, and in order to find a solution that fits most, you will never be able to fit all, but that fits most, then you need to and you have to have a broad horizon.
Yeah, agreed. And so where does reduced mobility rights fit in, and can you tell us a little bit more about reduced mobility rights?
Well, reduced mobility rights, as I said, that was the first response to those shortfalls in service and gaps. Hence the word rights, But along the way, I kind of built a different philosophy. I think personally that the culture of us versus them is the wrong culture. It's us. It's one. And when we work as one, we find solutions. Whereas when we go into confrontation, then we waste time, and we delay finding solutions.
And do you mean that point about from rights and that your sort of journey and evolution that it sounded as though maybe the rights has a sentiment to you that's not the tool you would use now, or is it more still about rights, but it's about that we all want rights, not them and us having rights?
Of course, it's important that there are legal frameworks that protect individual rights and hold to account those who deviate from common sense. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you just work on confrontation, then you waste time and you focus on the wrong objective, because the right objective is to ensure that people can travel in a seamless way, in a dignified way. Most importantly, it's seamless, dignified.
Yes.
Because it hurts me to think that Americans put men on the moon over 50 years ago, but you still have to be manually lifted when you get in on a plane.
And dignity is the word. I mean, it's before I got into what I do now as a career and a job and all the sort of more systemic changes I'm trying to achieve with allies and friends like yourself, Roberto. But as a kid, even then I was using that word of I had no dignity when I was being lifted on those planes as a kid, and it's still the same now. And I think that word dignity is such a important, powerful way of framing this, that it's very undignified the way disabled people are still supported or not so supported to get on an aeroplane.
But let me give you some insight on why the situation evolved in that direction.
Yeah.
When the first legal frameworks, put an obligation on airlines and airports to carry people with disability, because as you know, many years ago, some disreputable carriers would simply deny you access to flights.
Yeah.
Then what they used, the industry responded in a cheap way. So they started, you build a solid house from its foundations. They started utilizing softwares that were originally designed to handle luggage. So when you treat people like items, you remove dignity.
Yeah.
And only recently, only 4 or 5 years ago, there was finally one software producer. I'm not going to mention.
Sure, yeah.
One software producer who came up with the brilliant idea of putting the passenger and his or her needs at the center of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So you're no longer handling human items. You have a passenger with his or her needs,
Mm-hmm.
and the system is revolving around them in order to make sure that the experience is as seamless as it can.
Yeah.
So that was step one. But what we need now is, and we have the opportunity. The pandemic is a nightmare, but also presents opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
We have the opportunity of launching a complete overhaul of the way assistance is provided at airports. Maybe we dwell on this a little later.
Yeah, well, we can go where the conversation takes us. I mean, I guess when we're talking about the past, it is just for anyone watching that hasn't come across you before I think we understand now why you found out about the problems firsthand because of your son. And then it sort of took you into looking for answers and ended up in Brussels. And so I think that's really helpful in framing it. I suppose one thing we maybe mentioned before we then get right stuck in the middle of where we are now with COVID is it's sort of become a job for you, hasn't it? Like I mean, it is a passion and you've done lots voluntarily, but can you explain a bit how you went from just inquiring as to why it was so bad for you and your son and your family to then working with airports around the world?
When my mom and my dad had those 10 minutes of fun, and then my poor mom had those 9 months of pain, probably they instilled in me this way of
be spicy.
the desire of troubleshooting for and when I see a problem, there are different ways we can react to problems. We can see a problem and ignore it, or we can see a problem and complain about it.
Yeah.
Or we can see a problem and look for a solution.
Yeah.
And I am in that category. So
Yeah,
I see a problem and I ask myself, why? Why is this bottleneck here? What is producing this gap? And finding and then I start looking into finding ways that the gap can be removed permanently. Not temporarily, not as a patch, permanently.
Yeah. And but still, how does that become? Well, how do you describe that? Are you running a business that airports consult with? Are you an individual? But just that sort of entrepreneurial side, which we discussed quite a lot on the show. How would you describe how you're engaging with the airports to provide that solution that you've just explained?
Well, normally they operators engage with me because over the years I've had some good results.
Yeah.
And I always had this I always looked for the solution and for solutions that are to the benefit of the passenger, but at the same time not to the detriment of the operator.
It's
Because
the
most
art
of the times when you overhaul, you can be cost conscious and at the same time improve the quality of the service output.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to give in the context and the past projects or anything, but if not, let's get stuck into what's happened with COVID, what's going on at the moment behind the scenes, where are these opportunities? It'd be great to chat around that a lot more.
Well, with COVID, as you can see from our backgrounds, we are homebound.
Yeah.
Most of us are homebound, and will be for quite a while longer. As I said, I think this pandemic has been a disaster, has taken a lot of lives, and we must never forget that.
Sure.
But at the same time, it does present opportunities because the state of the economy and the state of the aviation sector is dire. Let's be honest and blunt about it. So as the industry restart, they will look for solutions that are beneficial to passengers, but at the same time that have to be cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
And which again, frames the opportunity of overhauling and reshaping the whole way that assistance is provided. So let me give you an example. Moving on from the solid foundation of the house, software services, IT solutions that put the passenger at the center of the action. In a world of tomorrow, what we need to do, and I was right at the start of the pandemic, I was at the IATA hackathon in Seattle at Microsoft, and it was an energizing moment because you had some of these brilliant minds from IT. Some of them, it was the first time that were being confronted with disability. Didn't even understand, couldn't grasp certain peculiarities. And I was one of the mentors there, and we spent 3 days. It was truly energizing. So think of this. Now, I maintain, and some of my friends believe that I'm a bit too outspoken. I maintain that the current system built around the IATA codes is no longer fit for purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you cannot translate the needs of a person in a 4-letter code.
Can you explain a bit for people that don't know what IATA is?
IATA is the trade association of airlines. They have, I think their members are more or less 300, the biggest 300 airlines in the world. Mm-hmm. So what they do is policy primarily, and they work with governments, and they are, if I have to look at all the trade associations around the world, probably they are the most focused and most effective. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, over the last year and a half, they have had a really clear focus on accessibility and making sure that airlines are more accessible and that provide the right type of assistance to others. Now, what I'm trying to do is to push them a step further in abandoning this old concept of IATA codes, that identify, when you book assistance, let's say you book assistance with a wheelchair, this will generate a little code that's called WCHR.
I know it well.
That the WCAC even better.
Yeah.
And it goes to the airline, to the airport, so the service providers can organize it. But as I said, we're all the same, but each of us has his or her peculiarities. So this code is no longer fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. Now, let me explain. The idea, it's a bit extreme, but it's cost effective and good for the passenger, is to create a booking page that is common to all airlines. So when you go and book your assistance, you find the same page and the same structure for all airlines.
Mm-hmm.
This will no longer, or it could be a hybrid, or it could be a standalone, will no longer just generate the WCHR, but will customize the experience for you. So
Mm-hmm.
both the airline and the airport are aware that you arrive to the airport, you are extremely independent, you don't need any type of assistance until the boarding gate,
Yeah.
which is exactly what I do when I travel alone.
Mm-hmm.
It again, the things that pain me is that you and I are the same. The only difference is that you need a little bit more of assistance at certain touch points. But let's say we both check in online, and yet you are obligated to report to the PRN desk, to report to the check-in, to give 7 times the information about your wheelchairs, which is stored somewhere, but nobody bothers or nobody can access that information. That has to be removed. So up until we get to the gate, you and I have the same experience.
Yeah.
So you can check in online from home, and then possibly, and that is the what I like to call the Uberization of the whole process. On the day you click your app, that sends the message to your emotion. Now we all dislike Big Brother, but in these days of track and trace, we have all accepted that we have to give up a little bit of our privacy for the good of everyone. So once you're being tracked, everybody knows where you are through your journey, and they can make sure that they're there to assist you where you need assistance. Now, think of the cost implications of this, because right now there is a blanket system. So you have to man the PRN desk and have somebody there for you because they don't know the assistance provider if you need assistance to the gate or not. Tomorrow, with this system, you will get the right assistance where it matters.
That's where we want to be, right?
That's where we want to be.
And so I guess one thing that jumps to mind is with the COVID-19, as you quite rightly caveated, it's lots of downside and, human cost and economic cost, etc. But sort of how does that present more of an opportunity to make this kind of change?
It presents an opportunity because, again, the industry is reacting to unprecedented situation, an unprecedented situation, both in terms of the way we travel, but also from a cost perspective and from the dire state of finances. And therefore, humanity fears change. We're all creatures of habit. We thrive on our comfort zone. So let me use a little metaphor. If you close your eyes and go pre-crisis and think of the last times you went to the restaurant, probably 8 times out of 10 you had the same exact food.
Yeah.
Because that is your comfort zone.
Yeah.
But then the pandemic hit, restaurants shut down. So all of a sudden, you were cooking at home or you were ordering a takeout.
Mm-hmm.
And you started wandering around. So you moved out of your comfort zone because of necessity.
Yeah.
So using the same metaphor, we have this great option because our comfort zone has been undermined. And so we have to look for something new, something better. And when people look for something new and something better, there you have the opportunity because we all fear change.
Yeah.
Like Rupert once said, the only thing to fear is fear itself.
Mm-hmm. So it's really about changing habits and behavior because of this abrupt change to our daily lives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that makes sense. And so did you say you've been speaking to IATA about this idea, this sort of Uber booking and customer service process, if you like?
Yeah, I first brought it up at the cabin safety conference last year in Turkey. But
So
then,
like
of course,
pre-COVID, you've been sort of
yes.
pushing this idea forward, yeah.
Oh no, but I've been pushing certain ideas forever.
Well, of course, yeah. It's just getting the ears and the opportunity, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just the opportunity. You have to understand that in life there are, and again, I'm being very objective. On one hand, you have three major bottlenecks. You have fear of change, which is very human and perfectly understandable. You have, and I say it in good sense, vested interests. So people who provide services to the industry, for accessibility, and therefore they have their business models built in a certain way, and they wouldn't be too happy to change their business models or the way they operate, because of course it implies, there's some work that goes into it. And then there's the group, what I call the false prophets. Those are the ones who promote equality and inclusion, but at the same time keep promoting that divisive culture of us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have these three sort of roadblocks. Now, the first is very simple. Pandemic helps us move out of our comfort zone
Yeah.
and look for a new comfort zone, and therefore fear becomes a secondary factor. The second one, vested interest, well, there is all interest in improving your services and making them better and cost effective, and therefore you just push change.
Yeah.
The third, well, those who preach different, who practice differently from what they preach, and those who humor them should think hard and long, about what they do, because what they do is goes against the cause for the community and everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. And so, like, I guess one thought as well is, how can I say disabled people? But I mean, as you say, it's not that
It's
labeling of
us,
different groups. It's
Martin. It's us.
everybody. But how can everybody get behind this to help sort of put pressure in an appropriate way for this change?
Over the years, I have come across very different situations, and the common denominator is that when change is industry-led and industry-driven, it's far more effective and better. The industry, over this pandemic, the industry has come together. So airlines and airports have found a new balance, a new way forward, which is far less confrontational. So there is a moment where the community and campaigners and persons with disabilities and other matters like me can help the industry shape the future.
Yeah.
And by example, let me give you an example. My good friend Chris Wood and his campaign Flying Disabled. I personally, I've always supported his views, and I think he's absolutely 101% right. But trying to impose that kind of seismic change on the industry through regulators is not going to cut the mustard. This has to be an industry-led, industry-driven effort, whereby the solution or solutions, could be more than one because we're not all the same, are cost neutral, and they can be, but at the same time are a terrific change for persons that need to stay in their wheelchairs while flying. Yeah. So there is an opportunity there to take Chris's campaign to the next level. And I think, honestly, I think in 5 or 10 years' time, if we do it right now, if he does it right now, and of course I would support him, and I trust you would support him as well, we're going to get there. But thanks to the industry, thanks to the desire of the industry to embrace this new spirit of
they
us.
kind of want it. Yeah, totally agree.
One team.
Was that one team? Yeah.
One team.
Yeah, absolutely. So speak of the devil, we've got a couple of people commenting as Gavin says, great to be here. And here is Chris.
Afternoon. There you go. I didn't know he would chime in, so I'm happy to see him.
And I'm imagining there's some in-joke here, but does the UAE have a role to play in accessible air travel? He's asked.
Well, the UAE has spent is one of the countries that have spent a lot of efforts and resources in making their country accessible, as you know as well, Martin. You were in the UAE last year or a year before.
I ended up. Kash and I were unwell, and we couldn't go at the very.
You were planning to. Okay.
Yeah, so I've still not yet been, but it's on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have really made sure that the country is as accessible as it gets.
Of course.
Yeah. It's still work in progress for air travel, but they have improved, and I have confidence that they will emerge, and they want to emerge before others because they had planned the expo, the World Expo for this year. Then it was postponed because of the pandemic, so it will go ahead next year. But I know, let's say, I have privileged information I cannot share, that they're doing their utmost to show the world that
What's
they
possible?
they believe in equality, and they believe in inclusion and accessibility, and that of course touches every aspect. Although they have this little peculiarity that they don't say persons with disabilities, they say people with determination.
Yes, I've heard that. What are your thoughts on not just their version of the word, but that general how we, label and describe groups? Have you come across really good, really bad examples?
Well, of course, there are a lot of bad examples. You know my views. I think that characterizing a person or defining a person because of how he looks, or the color of his skin, or the need he or she needs, to move about his normal life, is completely wrong.
Yeah,
And therefore, I would personally can all this divisive and archaic ways of defining disability. For me, disability doesn't exist,
yeah,
and it shouldn't exist in the vocabulary. The word itself is the meaning.
yeah. So
I
do
know
we
that
have
some
to?
advocates believe that saying, "Oh, but I'm a disabled person because that's the definition of my condition." You are a person,
Well, and with
period.
the airline world as an example, it's customers or passengers, right? Just that the system has
Exactly.
to allow for flexibility and different services for different people.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
But when you and I are on the same flight, sitting next to each other, we're both customers.
yeah,
There's no other difference. We are
yeah.
customers.
So Gavin said, "Great plan, Robert." Was what you're talking about, the sort of Uber, the service you're talking. We most certainly need to chat, as this is what we have launched and are developing with Edinburgh Airport. I mean, I think mentioning Chris and obviously Gavin from Neatbox has the Welcome app, which is trying to sort of add that layer of better customer service for disabled passengers or passengers with reduced mobility, etc. Like for you, what sort of innovations do we have or do we need that the more sort of entrepreneurial minded people like Chris and like Gavin should be looking to really innovate and disrupt?
Well, as I said, for me, the importance, if we want to treat everybody the same way, it's important that those who have peculiar needs can communicate them in detail to the food chain.
Yeah,
And the ability to customize your journey by letting people know what you need when you need it.
mm,
So let's say if I am traveling with a child with autism, then I will probably, one of my critical touch points will be security. So if I communicate that, then of course you have the lanyards and you have everything you want to make, but at least the service provider knows that the assistance is needed there,
mm,
because that's one of the stress points for
yeah,
in the journey of a person with autism. Although, especially with children very rarely travel alone. But it's also true that people with autism do not escape the aging process. So they're children with autism, young adults with autism, and then adults with autism. And then as life progresses, they will become more comfortable in flying, and therefore they will travel solo. So you start with the children, but at the same time you have to look out for you know other generations, the generations to come, and therefore you want to tailor your system. So if I had autism at the age of 56, I would love to inform the airport that, look, please let me know if you have a quiet area, and please be there for me at security and at boarding because I may get very anxious.
yeah.
That's all.
It's just that
But I
tailored.
don't want to go to the airport and go to the desk
No,
and
no.
be sat there and then wait for somebody to maybe force me into a wheelchair to go through the whole process like a piece of luggage.
Yeah.
I'm not a meat bag. I'm a person.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I are very similar with, we don't want to labor on the negatives. If there's a negative, we just want to solve it. And it's about that freedom to move, to be able to fly, to do all the things that someone without reduced mobility, etc., would want to do. So, but I mean, there's an example I had, all too well about some of my worst experiences, Roberto, because you're the first person I always go to when there's been an issue. But there was a time at Stansted where they actually refused to assist my partner with getting the hoist and the shower chair and the suitcase from the front door or from the desk to check in, because the PRM service was for people, not for things. And it's that kind of like common sense. You said it earlier on. It's all of this is just common sense, right? Like Kasia is not physically able to move 2 suitcases, a manual hoist, and a shower chair from A to B. So I suppose my question and just thought for the future is, how can we address the staff awareness side of engaging with people like myself when traveling?
Well, and there we go. We go back to once you've built a new foundation, the
Yeah,
system, so the information flows and flows in the perfect way. Then you can focus on staff. You will need less staff, which means you can invest more in training. Now,
yeah,
training is not the solution of everything, is a piece of the puzzle.
yeah,
It usually completes. Once you have your foundation, then you have your processes and procedures, and then you have proper training, then you have the perfect journey, then you have customer service excellence, because it's not assistance or special assistance, it's customer service. Going back to what we were saying about customers,
yeah,
it's customer service. Want to call it bespoke, let's call it bespoke, but still it's customer service. So once you have aligned your ducks all in the
yeah.
right direction,
Whack, whack.
then you then you have customer service excellence.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. And I suppose conversely, we talked about how humans can't be treated by software as items. There's obviously items like expensive wheelchairs and manual hoists and the things I have to travel with that unfortunately do get damaged. Is there a way this new foundation will ensure that these mobility items would be better treated as well?
Uh, from a technical perspective, work is in progress to make sure that the actual transport is safer and therefore there is less likelihood of damage. From a loading, from the loading and offloading of the device on the aircraft, it all comes down to the tools that are available to service providers, and there should be common sense. That's an area where, for example, regulators could and should regulate,
Because there is
because there are.
technology, isn't there? There is equipment that can lift a heavy wheelchair safely into the plane, right? It's just whether that equipment is at the plane and the people decide to use it or not.
Well, there's that, and then the law is not detailed when it comes to loading and offloading. It just
Mm.
says that it has to be done, and
Yeah,
it has to be done free of charge for the passenger. But then again, the methodology and the processes and procedures is left to the to the service provider or the ground handler, and without clear covenants, then you will always see the some service providers going for the cheap solution, to the point that at certain airports, if your wheelchair weighs more than 100 kilo, they will not accept it because they manually lift them in the cargo hold. So
mm.
you get 4 people to lift the device and put it in the cargo hold. They don't even
Right.
have belts.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, I think when I had all the frustrations as a passenger, but then dug more and more into, like you did, the laws, regulations, but just the processes, and like the fact that the airport is separate from the airline, and the airport subcontracts the baggage handling and the PRM service. Like, you learn that it is quite a complicated ecosystem, and
It's even more complicated than that, because, for instance, for the ground handling process, it's the airline that contracts the service, and the airport supervises when they remember to. So it's a very complicated. And again, you see, if the solution is industry-led and industry-driven, you have the possibility and ability to define processes and procedures that are fine, because it's the operators that come up with the solution. But when you impose them from above without clear knowledge of how the operation runs, then you come up with this sort of bottlenecks and gaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we got another one of the air travel crew. We got Josh saying less is more, tech is vital to this, allowing better customer service, excellent for the end-to-end customer journey. I don't know if he meant to share that emoji, but it suggests that Josh is potentially drunk with that emoji face that he shared at the end. And then he's gone on to say, someone get Roberto a beer, please.
I wish. I'm on water, unfortunately.
On the water. Or is it vodka?
No, I promise it's water. Never before 1 p.m. Vodka never before 1 p.m.
Yeah, we've got 22 minutes. So yeah, all good.
Yeah.
Because I'm very mindful there's going to be different types of people watching. I mean, we just touched upon that difference of airport, airline, baggage handlers, etc., etc. I mean, is there maybe it'd be worth just to sort of go through that end-to-end customer service in a generic way for someone, and also if there's disabled people watching that haven't flown that are interested, it might be really helpful just to really break it down how it is at the moment. Is that something you'd mind doing, Roberto?
That's perfectly fine. Well, let's talk about the two main frameworks: the European, and regardless of Brexit, the UK remains within the European framework, and the American framework, the US framework. The basic difference is the division of provision of services. In Europe, the airport is responsible for 80 to 85% of the total provision of service, 15% on the airlines, whereas in the US, it's the airline that's 100% responsible for it. And actually, in the US, airlines lease part of or all terminals from airports, and they manage the whole terminal themselves.
I never knew that. That's interesting.
There you go. So I would also like to say that, of course, some people have bad experiences when traveling by air, but I don't think that has anything to do with disability or ability. Yeah. It's just that sometimes some of us are meant to have a dreadful day.
Yes, that's true as well.
85% of they say that 85% of flights are on time. I always end up in the remaining 15%. I don't know why. So
that's your disability, is getting the wrong flight.
So we start from the booking process. I think it's vital, whether it is mandatory or optional, that a person that has needs lets the airline know, and the airline will let the airport know through the booking process what these needs are. Now, the whole concept has to be improved, as we discussed before, but the basics, it's always good to give them.
Yeah.
I think it is very important, if you're traveling with your personal mobility device, to have all the specs with you at all times, because although operators try to improve, you will end up being asked the same questions time and time again throughout your journey.
On my phone.
There you go. Perfect. You're a seasoned traveler.
I am.
Once you get to the airport, you will need to report to the PRM desk or the assistance desk or special assistants, whichever way it's called, where they should organize your journey. it still requires a good dose of patience, because most of the times they make you wait before security, then they carry you through security, and then you have to wait a little longer after security. Some airports would like you to stay in their PRM lounges. Other airports allow you to stay wherever you want. Other airports, the less friendly ones, they will take you straight to the gate, regardless if the gate is far away from concessions and restaurants or accessible toilets, for that matter. The airport should get you on board first, so pre-board you. That should be technically it's about 5 minutes before the general boarding starts. But do not be surprised if that's not the case, and you're boarded with the general boarding during general boarding, or sometimes even after.
It's a good job I'm an exhibitionist, and don't mind 200 people watching me get lifted onto the seat.
Well, for you, you get on the board, you start waving. Yeah. I'm the famous Martin Sibley. Yeah, it's me. It's not ideal if you're shy. Let's put it this way, or self-conscious.
No, it's not really ideal anyway. But yeah, it's that's where we've been.
Then in the boarding process can be from the gate where an air bridge is available, or through an ambulift, which is a kind of a lorry, with a big lorry looking like an ice cream carrier or truck, where you're taken on that one and then prepared, and then the truck goes up, lifts up, gets to the door, and then you get through from there. Which I have to say is better.
Yeah,
far less miserable than what you would do if you were a Main Street passenger, let's call it, who has to queue under the rain on tarmac.
That is quite a VIP feeling, actually, when you're in the ambulift looking at everyone getting rained upon. So it's something for something.
So there is an advantage to that, honestly. I have to say I was surprised when a couple of years ago I went to visit one of the largest manufacturers in Europe of ambulifts, and the general manager there was gracious enough to let me drive one of this 400,000 euros piece of equipment around the factory. I mean, they had a lot of guts, but I have to say they're huge, but they're very easy to drive.
Yeah.
Very, very easy. And I learned a lot from that experience. I learned how, things may happen, what happens when things go wrong, So that was very useful. And so I will always be thankful for their generosity to let me drive that piece of equipment. Okay. While you're on board, the basic, you can travel alone unless you're not able, and by being not able, I don't mean walking. You're not able to make your way to the emergency exit. Mm-hmm. So if you can roll to the emergency exit, crawl to the emergency exit, jump to the emergency exit, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you cannot do that unaided, you will need to travel with someone.
Right.
You have to be able to feed yourself. But maybe you can have lunch before or something before your flight. So that's.
I met someone in Tenerife last year, and he had, I can't remember what the apparatus was, but it was like, say, a wooden spoon or something, and it meant that he could get his sandwich to his mouth when he flew on his own, and he was quite, he said about getting to the exit. I don't know if he would have been able to even do that, but I was impressed that he'd flown from the UK to Tenerife on his own. To eat his lunch, he had like a skewer or something to get his sandwich to his mouth.
That's cool. You have to be able to open and close the safety belt.
Right.
And you have to be able to toilet yourself. But the airline has a responsibility to help you get to the toilet. This is why, and this is a little bit of a point of contention for me, because the availability of aisle chairs, the narrow wheelchairs on board, that you know very well, is mandatory in the US, but it's optional in Europe, and that's an important change that the regulation should do because, of course, for health and safety reasons, and especially nowadays in this time of COVID-19, cabin crew are not allowed to lift you. They do it, but they're not allowed to. If they get caught, they can be fired. So in special circumstances, they will still do it, but they're not allowed. So it would be best if not to make them risk their job for doing something. So they have to provide the aisle chair, but then you have to transfer. They have the ability to transfer yourself or slide from your seat to the aisle chair. And then we get to another issue that I've been discussing with regulators and airlines for a number of years now. Let's suppose that I have a severe impairment, but I'm able to transfer myself. Because I am categorized as WCHT, the airline will sit me on a window. Now, if I have to transfer myself on the aisle chair, I would rather be seated on the aisle. It can be cumbersome because the person next to me may want to get in and get out, and so come over me. But it's a trade-off because there's no other option. So I would rather be closer to the transfer point. So airlines mention safety regulations, but there is no mention anywhere that the safety requirement that you be seated by the window seat. Right. So there sometimes you have to have a little bit of a discussion with the airline. I mean, I can understand why they want you to make you feel more comfortable, and so nobody has to jump over you during the flight.
Yeah, you get a faithful, like your fellow passenger.
EASA, which is the European Safety Agency for Travel, ran some mock evacuation tests with persons with disabilities a couple of years ago, and a normal type of aircraft, and what their conclusions were that there is no difference. You do not impede the evacuation because you have a serious condition, wherever you're seated.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's interesting. Cool, that's helpful. Someone's already said that, Mandy, I've never taken my 4-year-old disabled girl on a plane. She's a wheelchair user and has a lot of medical equipment. It frightens me, the thought of taking her. And you have mentioned more things I've never thought of. I mean, it's one of those, isn't it, that knowledge is power. So that it is possible, pretty much. I know there's a medical side. Maybe you want to mention that, Roberto, that some people do have to have a sort of doctor's certificate that they're fit to fly.
MEDIF, the doctor certificate, is something that certain airlines require from wheelchair users where there is no need. In reality, you should have a medical certificate only if you have maybe respiratory conditions.
I'm going to say it's more that direction, yeah.
COPD, for instance, or if you have some infectious disease, or you have some potentially life-threatening condition like violent seizures. So it would be advisable to have that. Yeah. In these COVID-19 times, my advice to everybody who wants to travel, regardless if they're customers or bespoke customers, is that always double your quantity, the quantity of prescription medication you take with you, because there might be some out of the blue restriction imposed on air travel wherever you are, and you want to make sure that you always have plenty of your prescription medications. We all read horror stories of people with serious conditions that were stuck somewhere in the world and they could not find their medication and they were stuck there. So rule of thumb, always have a month's worth of your medication, regardless if you stay away 1 day or 1 week or 2.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then in terms of what Mandy's saying, I think so there are people that have decided not to fly because they feel it's too risky or too stressful, and that's personal choice. But I think there are more and more ways that airlines, for example, allow oxygen on. I know like Virgin Atlantic, they were saying that you're allowed oxygen on board. And so I think there are more and more possibilities, shall we say, but it is also an individual choice, isn't it?
It's always an individual choice, and of course, airlines are doing a great deal to make more information available to the traveling public, so people before booking they can understand what they cannot do, which kind of services will be available on board, what kind of obligation is there on them if they need a medical certificate or not. So that is good work that through IATA has been done over the past years, and it keeps improving month after month.
Yeah.
But in terms of fear, as I said before, I was concerned, not fearful, but concerned when I started traveling with my son. But then something happened at an airport in Asia. We were queuing and at the check-in desk, and he was sat in his McLaren, special needs buggy, which is kind of a big one, big equipment for the tiny boy. And I got to the desk, and there was a huge queue of people checking in right behind me. And the check-in agent stood up, looked at my son, and shouted, "What's wrong with him? Why can't he walk?" Now that was the trigger.
Mm,
That's why I said things have to change.
yeah.
I did say tell the guys some other things, but this is not
Yeah, not the forum.
the right space to repeat them.
Yeah, like yeah. I mean,
I
I'm
won't
sure
quote
everyone
much.
watching with a disability or family member with a disability that have flown have had those horror moments. I've certainly had a book full, but the other side is it's a beautiful world out there of lovely experiences to be had, and for
And
me
that
it's
was,
just a
to
shame that.
complete that.
Sorry, you're gone,
That
gone.
was to complete my thought, and I
Yeah.
understand. I was just concerned, but I respect that others may have fear.
Yes.
But the ability to travel and exposing him to different cultures, different places, different experiences
Mm,
has been fundamental. Fundamental. It has been life changing.
mm,
So it's also true that, as we said earlier, for 95% of the people who travel by air, everything will be fine. Sometimes you have to have a little patience, with a bit more patience than others, but everything will be fine. Some of us will have a dreadful journey for reasons that have nothing to do with it's. Sometimes we simply have bad luck.
yeah. Yeah.
I met once a couple who had the gentleman had it was a double amputee, so he had some serious issues,
Mm,
moving around. And but that wasn't his day because he had a bad experience at the airport in Israel. He had an awful experience in flight, and he had a terrifying experience at the airport of arrival.
mm,
So the chances that everybody along the line does it wrong to him are below minimal
yeah.
if you think about it. So I really believe that he was meant to, there were some technicalities, but he was meant to have a bad day. And that,
Yeah.
that can happen to anyone.
Yeah, agreed. So we've got, I think, the last member of the A team joining. We got Graham Race now, and Graham saying, "Hi Martin, hi Roberto. Do you sense that any particular airport and airline might work to pilot this?" And that's obviously referring to your idea we were talking about earlier on about the sort of bespoke service.
I could tell you, but then you know what I had to do to you? I cannot share publicly, but there's an answer in that.
Yeah, there. Okay, well, that's good to know. Good to know that stuff is going on. Fiona said,
Work in progress.
"Work in progress." Yeah, we'll label it at that. Fiona said, "Do baggage handlers get trained RE mobility equipment? I find animals are treated better than my wheelchair, and it's my legs."
Um, to answer your question, to the best of my knowledge, some minimal training is given to them. Whether it's retained or forgotten, it has to be seen, and sometimes you can see it from a negative perspective. Um, that's an area, as I mentioned before, where regulators should regulate more and better and more in details about the do's and don'ts and what covenants must be followed and adhered to.
Yeah.
Um, but in the last three words, that's the answer. Because as we were saying before, you, Martin, when you get to the boarding gate, somebody tells you, give me my legs.
Mm.
Nobody should be told that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
Or if you have to be told that, then I have to do whatever is in my power as an operator to give you confidence and peace of mind. Like there
Mm.
is an airline that is trialing a system whereby when your wheelchair is put in the cargo hold, it sends you a push message to your
Mm.
app that the wheelchair is in the cargo hold. And that is already 80% of the anxiety out of the picture because until you arrive, you don't know if the wheelchair is there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But
true.
if you know it's there, well, worst comes to worst, they're going to break it. Not joking. But although unfortunately it happens.
Yeah.
But just knowing that your legs are there,
Yeah.
even though they took them away, they're there. Now, the next step is making sure that people treat your legs well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Work in progress.
Yeah, work in progress. Cool. We're gonna wrap up in a couple of minutes, Roberto. But Mandy's saying, loving your information. Good idea to look into everything, risk assess, and contact the airlines. And I don't want fear to be the boss of us, which I thought was a really nice comment from
That's
Mandy.
the spirit.
Exactly, exactly. Cool. Was there anything you wanted to mention that we've not touched upon, Roberto?
Oh, yeah. Speaking about COVID-19,
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with the case of Air China Flight 112.
Nope.
That
Tell me.
was back in 2003
Right.
when there was the outbreak of SARS.
Uh-huh.
An infected person got on that flight, and as a result, he got 22 other people infected,
Hmm.
and four of the others, plus him, died as a result of
Right.
contagious disease. Now, we have heard the many stories or many, and again, sometimes regulators should let the industry drive the process
Mm.
about social distancing on planes. The analysis of that flight proves that social distancing on planes really doesn't matter, does nothing.
Yeah.
PPE, face masks, and gloves, because we keep touching everywhere, disposable gloves, are the answer.
Right.
Had that passenger be wearing a face mask, the outcome of that flight would have been dramatically different for the better.
Mm, mm.
So that's the answer. This whole thing, think of this thermal screening. Everybody's talking about thermal screening as a solution. Now, we know that a lot of people who are infected are asymptomatic, so they have no fever. So
Yeah.
thermal screening is already useless. However, it can be worse because if you have rheumatoid arthritis, and there's a lot of people to do, you have a constant fever. So you
Mm.
may be denied boarding because you have a fever that has nothing to do
Yeah. Yeah.
with COVID.
Oof.
If you have a urinary tract infection, same thing. If you have Crohn's disease, same thing.
Yeah.
So this thermal screening is bollocks. Forgive me to call it as it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
because and also can be detrimental because it denies access to travel to people that do not have an infection but have
Um,
other conditions that trigger fever.
yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And is that something you or others are feeding into the decision makers?
Well, unfortunately, there has been a knee-jerk reaction to all this, and
Yeah.
everybody was looking at things, in panic and terror and haste. But if you look at the only viable solution is PPE, PPE, PPE. It's dreadful. You have to wear a face mask. If you have conditions like autism and dementia, you have to prepare the passenger you have to explain really, and the pre-flight preparation is a bit cumbersome.
Yeah.
But once you have those, because face masks are not really, well, they do prevent contagion, but mostly if you have the infection, you will not spread it.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So that's
And social distancing, forget it. 45 centimeters are not going to do anything.
yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. I mean, and do you think the end game is the vaccination? Is that like what? When does it? How and when does it go back to where we were? Will it ever go back to where we were?
In my opinion, it will not. SARS came up in 2003, and there isn't a vaccine today.
Right.
I was reading that there's already plus more than 30 mutations. So it is likely that even if there is a vaccine, it may work on certain mutations and not on others.
Yeah.
I think we need to learn to live with it. Live in this new world with COVID, and like humanity has learned to live with many other diseases in the past. I mean,
Yeah.
think about history. More Indios were killed by the diseases the Spaniards brought to the Americas than weapons, because the diseases that the Spaniards brought there were unknown to that particular part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with the Eskimos. Unfortunately, we are time bombs in that respect, and it's either we decide not to live anymore, or if we want to live, we have to learn to coexist, with our dangerosity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. So true. Well, it's certainly been a interesting year so far with the outbreak of COVID-19 and the lockdown and the changes that are coming out. And I mean, a common theme on these daily interviews has been the silver lining in many different directions around disability and inclusion and potential opportunity to, I think, as you said, it's about breaking that habit and behavior and getting people to think differently and think more all-encompassing and inclusively. So let's hope that sees its way through and things get more inclusive. But yeah, I really, as always, enjoyed chatting with you, Roberto. It's a really interesting time, and I think it was great that run through you did of the process for people watching like Mandy that have maybe not been as up on the possibilities and the way it works. So yeah, thank you very much, Roberto.
I would like to see everybody flying with confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
And we get there eventually.
Everyone watching, thank you for your time and your comments and your questions. Roberto, where is it best for people to follow or get in touch with you if they've got any follow-up questions?
Oh, they can come to the website, reducemobility.eu, or they can go to my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. So LinkedIn.
I'm always traceable.
Always traceable. And Yasmin is asking, will a recording be available? Yes, it will be on my Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn as it is now, forevermore. And the YouTube link will be live from tomorrow as well, which is easier to repurpose in other blogs and things like that. So yes, Yasmin, there'll definitely be a few varieties of the recording anyway. Cool. I think we're at the end, Roberto.
Martin, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And my goal is to speak with you on these matters and never again speak to you when you have a problem, because you will no longer have problems when flying.
Exactly.
We have to sort them all out.
We'll be meeting up in a foreign climate over good food and drink, and no problems with flying.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Take care, mate, and thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you. It's Friday already tomorrow. Wow! So I'll see everyone tomorrow for the last episode of the week. In the meantime, have a great day. Bye bye.